attack on an alleged drug-running boat, we discuss the latest in politics on today's Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Today on the program, Party Politics co-hosts Brandon Rottinghaus and Jeronimo Cortina weigh in on those and other developments in Washington, Texas, and here in the Houston area.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, imagining life after cars. We talk with the hosts of a podcast that challenges car-centric communities like Greater Houston. Plus, Ensemble Theatre's unique take on a Christmas show. Thanks for joining us on News 88.7, and remember to check out our live video feed on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump held a rally last night in central Pennsylvania. He was supposed to talk about the cost of living, but he wandered over many topics. He used foul language to denigrate black immigrants and praised the looks of his cabinet members. NPR's Tamara Keith says Trump did veer back to talking about prices.
Last night, yet again, he mocked the preoccupation with affordability. He says that he inherited a mess. In other words, don't blame me, blame the former guy. And he says things are already cheaper. In particular, he talks a lot about gas prices. According to Gas Buddy, prices are down about 8 cents on average a gallon from a year ago. But that's not really enough savings to make up for higher grocery prices and utility bills and health care costs.
NPR's Tamara Keith reporting. The U.S. Supreme Court is hearing arguments today in a case that could have major implications for the death penalty. The justices will consider whether executing people with certain disabilities violates their constitutional rights, as NPR's Kristen Wright explains.
The court struck down the execution of people with intellectual disabilities in 2002. Today, the justices are hearing arguments in an Alabama case that is focused on how intellectual disability is defined and whether IQ should play a role in that determination. Joseph Clifton Smith confessed to a 1997 murder, but he argues his disability should spare his life. But lawyers for the state point to Smith's borderline IQ scores and argue he's not intellectually disabled. Advocates say, though, that determination should be holistic, not a single number. The ruling could have implications on how courts in several states apply the death penalty. Kristen Wright, NPR News.
Billionaire Elon Musk says he thinks his Doge entity that slashed federal jobs was only, quote, a little bit successful. In an interview on the Katie Miller podcast, Musk says he would not lead the Doge project today if he were asked. He says he'd rather work on his companies, such as EV maker Tesla. Stocks opened mixed this morning on Wall Street as investors wait for news on interest rates from the Federal Reserve this afternoon. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose about 90 points in early trading.
The Fed is widely expected to cut its benchmark interest rate by a quarter point today. The central bank's hoping to cushion a sagging job market, but policymakers are also keeping a watchful eye on inflation. The Labor Department said this morning that private sector wages and salaries rose 3.6% during the 12 months ending in September. During that same period, prices rose by 3%. Stock in Cracker Barrel's down after the restaurant chain reported a drop in sales and lowered its forecast for the year. Cracker Barrel is still trying to recover from an unpopular and short-lived logo change back in August. Pepsi shares are up after the soft drink and snack maker announced plans to cut prices and narrow its product mix. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harrop. Applications for Houston ISD's kindergarten through 12th grade school choice program are now open for the upcoming school year. The program allows families to apply to as many as 10 different programs at campuses outside of their school zone. Applications for Phase 1 of this closes on February 27th. Our Bianca Seward reports.
Parents submit one application and rank up to 10 preferred programs. The district then runs a lottery to assign seats. If a student doesn't get into their higher-ranked choices, they're placed on the wait list. HISD advises families to apply now in Phase 1, when they have the best chance of getting their preferred school. Families keep their child's spot at their zone school unless they accept an offer from another campus. A school choice fair will be held this Saturday at Mickey Leland College Prep Academy from 9 a.m. to noon. Though it's also referred to as school choice, this open enrollment at HISD is different than the school choice voucher program passed by the Texas legislature early last year. Applications for that program, which reimburses families for private school tuition, is slated to open in February. I'm Bianca Seward, News 88.7.
A Montgomery County deputy shot a suspect during a traffic stop yesterday outside of Carl Barton Park. Police say they tried to pull the suspect over. However, upon exiting the vehicle, he began acting erratically and the interaction escalated. Multiple outlets report the officer fired 3 shots, hitting the suspect in the hand. He then fled towards the park, and that's where police apprehended him. Harris County voters will have an opportunity to shape local and state politics with several elections on the ballot next year. Our Sarah Gruno reports that a new county judge will also be selected.
Monday was the deadline for candidates to file in next year's March primary election. 9 candidates, including 6 Republicans, have filed their intention to run for County Judge Lena Hidalgo's seat after she announced earlier this year that she will not seek re-election. The Democratic frontrunners include former Houston Mayor Annise Parker and former City Council member Letitia Plummer. Republican candidates include Marty Langton, the president of the city's firefighter union. Democratic Harris County Commissioners Adrian Garcia and Leslie Briones filed for re-election for their seats next year. The commissioners only have Republican challengers, including Richard Vega and Raquel Hernandez Bujorn. Steve Raddick, a Republican and former county commissioner, is running against Briones. I'm Sarah Gruno, News 88.7.
And stay here for more on local, state, and national politics coming up on Houston Matters. 59 degrees right now here on the UH campus. We will hit a high close to 73 today. I'm Matt Harrop, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on News 88.7 and Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, imagining life after cars and a unique approach to the traditional holiday theater production. But first, Monday's filing deadline led to some last-minute jockeying in races for the U.S. Senate and Congress, while the Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee says there's no need to continue investigating that military strike that killed survivors of an attack on an alleged drug-running boat. Let's discuss those and other developments now as we begin our regular Wednesday political roundup today with the hosts of Houston Public Media's Party Politics program, Jeronimo Cortina and Brandon Rottinghaus. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning, Greg. Good morning.
So Monday night was the deadline to file for the midterm elections. Jasmine Crockett entered the race for U.S. Senate. Colin Allred dropped out of that race, but then filed to run in a newly drawn congressional seat. J.C. Jetton is no longer running in the 22nd district after President Trump endorsed Trevor Nails, the twin brother of Troy Nails, who's leaving that seat. And the president's now regretting he pardoned Democrat Henry Cuellar. Surprised, I guess, that Cuellar's running again as a Democrat. Did I get everything?
No.
What did I miss?
This is the most chaotic filing period I think we've seen. Right up to the 11th hour, we saw a bunch of changes. I think part of it reflects the fact that we're in this redistricting phase where it's creating just a lot of chaos on the ground, and members are trying to figure out where they are going to sit when the music stops. But I think it also reflects the fact that there's still a lot of internal fights in the parties, especially the Democratic Party leading up to the Senate race, in terms of where ideologically the party wants to go. That creates a lot of uncertainty, and I think everyone's kind of trying to jockey for position to figure out kind of where they're going to land when this is all done.
All right, well, let's talk in more specifics. I mean, I mentioned Trevor Nails running for his brother's seat. We talked about that last week. What other developments are you watching in the Houston area in terms of congressional districts under the new map for next year's election?
Well, obviously, we have the new CD9, Congressional District 9, Congressional District 18. We have a runoff very soon. That for obviously City Council. But the interesting part is what Brandon is saying is we're going to see, especially in these new congressional districts, how the parties are going to be within the party. You're going to have this internal battle between I would say, the old traditional leaders, right? And, for example, in the case of Al Green and whoever wins between Menifee and Edwards.
Yeah, let me just walk through this. And I know it's something we've talked about before, but I think it bears repeating and walking through as clearly and carefully as we can. So, voters in the current old map 18th Congressional District have a runoff election at the end of January to decide between former Houston City Council member Amanda Edwards and Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee to fill the remainder of the late Sylvester Turner's term. Once that's resolved, then a couple months later, we have the primary where both have already filed because the filing deadline was Monday to run in that election. So they're both going to run again then, regardless of who wins, it would seem. And Al Green, who had been and is under the old map a congressman in another district, will now run in the 18th district.
Correct.
So those potentially three, maybe more candidates will all be jockeying to be the Democrat to run in the 18th at the end of next year. How'd I do?
Perfect.
A+.
I'm exhausted. I'm taking a break. You guys carry on.
Yeah, and imagine how the voters feel. We've talked about this before, but basically all of this churn creates a lot of confusion, and voters are still trying to figure out exactly when and how they should vote. It's just a problem, I think, for a redistricting cycle. I think the other implication to redistricting from the Supreme Court is that you're going to see this happening more and more often. It may happen certainly at the congressional level again, but it's also going to happen at the House level for the Texas House of Representatives and the Senate level for the Texas Senate. So there's going to be, I think, just a lot more churn for voters to have to track.
Maps aside, there are other races that I think we need to start paying attention to statewide going into next year. Of course, with Ken Paxton running for the U.S. Senate, that means that there are going to be candidates running for Attorney General, and that's just one of a few offices. What other offices are you following here?
Well, we're going to have, all of the offices, right? We're going to have agricultural commissioner. We're going to have also comptroller, very interesting race. We're going to have the attorney, well, obviously the attorney general, U.S. Senate, within the Democratic primaries, but also the Republican primaries. So there's going to be a lot of movement. And the interesting part is that in some of these races, Democrats have only one chosen person, right? In the other ones, obviously, you have more representation from one side or the other. But still, it's going to be interesting. In the gubernatorial race, we have a couple of folks running from the Democratic side. You have Gina Hinojosa that announced her candidacy a couple of weeks ago. Then on the Republican side, you have obviously Governor Abbott. But Governor Abbott, one way or the other, is going to have to run in a quote-unquote primary, I suppose. Technically. I don't know for what purposes, but it's going to happen. And then we have other candidates on the Democratic side as well.
Yeah, Chris Bell, who's a former member of Congress, former city council member, is running. You've also got Andrew White, who has run for governor before. He's a businessman here from Houston, is making the rounds and trying to persuade people that he's a better choice for a kind of general election. And that's a lot of the debate that's going to come about, especially for the Democrats. They see blood in the water. They think that this is a moment where they can really use the politics nationally to get some traction here in Texas. That's always been the theory of the case, but I think Democrats now are really interested in finding out if that's true. So you're going to see a lot, even in the Senate race, about kind of whether Tallarico is a better general election candidate than Jasmine Crockett. These are definitely concerns Democrats have always had, but now they're really in the face because it is the moment where Democrats are hopeful they can use this.
We have heard that in every election cycle going back 30 years, however, and in every one of those cycles, every single statewide race, Republicans have won.
Yeah. It's very true. And I have looked over our notes on this, and you see a very common pattern. It is something Democrats are looking to break out of, and it's still an internal debate. In fact, the whole lead up to the Senate runoff, Senate race filing was really all about kind of who's a better general election candidate. But part of being a better general election candidate means exciting the base, which means winning the primary. So there's still just a lot of uncertainty about this. For the Senate race in particular, you've got really two progressive candidates who are running. You've got James Tallarico, like I mentioned, mentioned, and Jasmine Crockett, who threw her hat in the ring at the very last minute to some degree. And I think that's really a win for progressives because now they have two pretty solid candidates who are from that progressive wing of the party. There's not really a moderate choice here. Typically, moderates were doing pretty well the last decade or so in those primaries statewide for Democrats. This is going to break that. And I guess that it's a real stress test to see if Democrats can be effective in a primary, rally that base, really make sure they can raise that money, and then have that translate into a general election victory.
In Washington, the chair of the House Armed Services Committee, Republican Congressman Mike Rogers, says he's got all the answers he needed about the September military strike that killed survivors of an attack on an alleged Venezuelan drug-running boat. And Houston area Congressman Dan Crenshaw is among those who maintain the Pentagon was within its rights to do it, that those on the other side of the aisle, and actually on their side of the aisle as well, who have suggested it might be a war crime, are offering up manufactured outrage. Are you surprised by the pushback to either downplay or end congressional probes into this?
Well, this happens. It's a normal alliance in terms of when you have these, I guess, political scandals, right? Brandon is the expert on political scandals, but
studying them, not making them.
Right.
Give it time.
Just to clarify.
Give it time.
Yeah. True. Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I think that what it shows is that when you have a political scandal, co-partisans are going to be more likely to support whatever it is just to get rid of it. On the other hand, those are not in your political party are going to be more likely to be more vociferous in terms of the magnitude of the scandal. This one is very particular because you have a lot of issues going on here, right? The first one is saying that the United States has named these unnamed organizations as a terrorist, that it constitutes an attack to national security. It happens hundreds of miles away from the U.S. in international waters. So you have international law. You have then rules of engagement. You have these whole debate in terms of the double tapping. That means that you are or you're not allowed to, destroy enemy combatants or a unit after you have bombed them once. So there is a lot of moving pieces here. So I think that what they're doing right now is just playing the notebook as they should in terms of what they should be doing when you have these political scandals.
And I guess, again, the distinction here is that this is not a purely partisan inquiry, that there are Republicans among Democrats who are continuing to ask questions, even if the chair of the Armed Services Committee is satisfied he's got his answers.
It's a great point, and it does, I think, reflect this larger concern that there is this problem coming out of the Department of War, that they're not managing these affairs properly. It's about, of course, Venezuela, but it's also about just troop morale. It's about how much money and where that money is going to come from, how that's going to be allocated. Congress is debating the money and the way to allocate that money. Usually it's a bipartisan effort. It's become a much more partisan effort in the last couple of days. So there's just a lot of, I think, frustration from Congress about how this is playing out. So you do see some Republicans who have pushed back on the White House saying, we want more information. It seems like they're in a place where they're happy to see what they've seen, but there's still concern from Democrats in particular that say that this does alert to some very troubling issues. And I think that this won't be the last of the situation we've seen.
We are just getting started with today's political roundup. My guests are the hosts of Houston Public Media's Party Politics program, Brandon Rottinghaus and Jeronimo Cortina. Up next, what's prompted a number of proposed handouts in federal and state government for healthcare, farmers, property owners, and newborns. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues.
Hi, I'm Lenny Ambrose from St. Arnold Brewing Company, proud supporters of Houston Public Media. Right now, with your $60 donation, you can choose tickets to News and Brews. This member-exclusive event takes place February 17th. Enjoy a pint, connect with fellow NPR fans, and meet the Houston Public Media newsroom in person. Select News and Brews tickets when you donate at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
It comes from Baylor College of Medicine. With 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science. Support comes from Visit Galveston, presenting winter events across the island, including Holiday in the Gardens, Polar Express train ride, and attractions welcoming visitors during the holiday season. More information is available at visitgalveston.com.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. We are in the middle of this week's political roundup today with the University of Houston's Brendan Rottinghaus and Jeronimo Cortina. They are the hosts of Party Politics, which airs Friday nights at 7:30 on News 88.7, Friday nights at 8 on TV8, and is also available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has been floating a couple of economic plans in recent days. On Tuesday, he called for an increase in homestead exemptions and lowering the age for senior exemptions to 55 to reduce property taxes. And last week, he suggested the state should give every baby born in Texas $1,000 to invest in the stock market, following a federal model suggested by President Trump. Would this be in lieu of something else?
I don't know. It's very expensive propositions. And it's, once again, we're putting a lot of stuff on the credit card. And we're extending and we're just making somehow the minimum payments on the credit card every month and putting more stuff, very expensive stuff, is very worrisome in terms of thinking that Texas economy is going to grow in perpetuity. So just to give you an example, if you want to give $1,000 to each kid that is born in Texas, in 2023, the latest data that we have from the CDC, we have around 387,000 new births in Texas. So multiply that by 1,000, you're talking about $388 million. So obviously the fertility rate, has a different trend, goes down, but let's suppose that trend goes to, I don't know, let's say $250,000 new births every single year. You're talking about $250 million every single year.
In a biennial budget, that adds up fast,
And it's a lot of money, right? Because one year, boom, something can go wrong. Then decreasing the age from 65 to 55, yes, that would be significantly great for property owners, right? But once again, what are you going to do with the hole that you're opening in public finances? So these are just things that have been proposed. We haven't seen the real numbers. Probably the lieutenant governor has something interesting to talk about, and eventually we have to see the numbers to see how these things fare.
There's a lot of interesting components to this. One of them is that you see the governor and lieutenant governor once again disagreeing in a kind of public but kind way about how to proceed on property taxes. Governor Abbott essentially promised that they were going to eliminate property taxes. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says that's not practical. It would mean increasing the sales tax by a lot, probably to 25 to 30 cents
handing out $1,000, that's practical?
That's practical in the sense that there's a political need to have that done. This is obviously following Donald Trump, but there was significant pushback even on that. I think your hunch is right that you saw a lot of Republicans saying, well, if we can just give people free money, how about we just kind of reduce the overall tax burden to start? You also had them looking at the kind of, what that says about Texas and sort of essentially giving people this money would encourage people to come here in some ways that Republicans have said is impractical or illegal. So there's definitely a lot of complicated arrangements here. But the bottom line is that this is a very expensive thing. And this, I think, is a signal that you've got a tax system which is effectively broken. And no one's willing to admit it. But basically the tax system has been changed so steadily over the years that it's really a difficult prospect to try to continue to reform this. If it's just a political stand, then that's one thing. But if it's really about making meaningful change to how taxation is distributed, then it has to be done from the ground up. And I think there's no appetite for that.
Meantime, speaking of handouts. Let's face it, that's what we're talking about. President Trump recently announced a $12 billion farm aid program designed to provide relief for farmers affected by the president's trade policies, including tariffs. How's it being received?
I mean, it's one of these things, right? Farmers have been significantly hurt. And when you look at advanced or developed democracies in terms of the agricultural industry, every single advanced democracy heavily subsidizes their industries, including China, that is not a Western democracy. But in Europe, heavily subsidized, Canada, heavily subsidized, the United States, subsidized. And with the tariffs and just opening these trade war had a double whammy effect. The first one is that farmers cannot purchase the products that they need to produce, right? Machinery or whatever it is that they need, right? And then on the other hand, a foreign country said, like, you know what, I'm not going to buy your stuff. I'm going to buy it from somewhere else. So you get that double whammy. These $12 billion are going to be distributed to farmers that grow crops are going to be a drop in the bucket, right? Because these are not going to be a substitute for profits. So it's going to help, yes, indeed, but it's not going to, I guess, erase all the pain that they have had. So the question here is if $12 billion in terms of distributing this money before the midterm election is going to have the effect that you would think, okay, fine, I made a mistake with the trade policies without accepting that it's a trade. Here's some money, we call it even. I don't know if that's going to be significantly effective to basically erase your mind like what's the movie that they did?
Men in Black.
Men in Black, just forget about everything and nothing happened, right? I don't think it's going to work that easy.
Politics is a fast-moving entity these days, but people do remember, and Republicans definitely look at this like a handout. I think your kind of discussion about this, Craig, is right, that people look at this as being a problem for a Republican who would, in theory, support a kind of smaller government. Now, it's not to say that this isn't needed, because it definitely is. A lot of these farm communities, a lot of these states that are heavily agricultural are definitely in danger. But Republicans who are against this look at this and say, well, essentially, this is tax money. This is a tariff fund that's paid for by people who are now buying goods that are more expensive because of the tariff. So that's really just kind of taking one bucket of water and filling a different bucket of water and saying that, you know, you've essentially filled this new bucket, which you haven't. You've just displaced where that went and came from. So that's an issue. The other is that there's a concern that this money will go to basically large agribusinesses instead of small family farms. That's really just kind of assisting a particular wing of the economy, which has its benefits, but definitely is not going to be a kind of rising tide situation. The final problem is that, you know, I think that giveaways like this are useful for presidents. They do have a tendency to kind of follow this pattern, right? You've got presidents who are willing to kind of give money to constituencies and particular states that are swing states where they're hopeful to do better and they're paying off the kind of support from the past. But the scholarship on this, especially with the Biden stimulus check, suggests that it's really a kind of wash, that all it does is kind of polarize things. That in particular, in that case, what happened was that you had more people who were getting these checks who would vote for Democrats, but then Republicans getting the same check would vote for Republicans. And so it just kind of polarized everything. So if it is a political play, it's not going to necessarily pay off for the Republicans in the way that they hope.
There is still more subsidies to talk about. What's the latest news in the debate over whether to extend Affordable Care Act subsidies, which are due to expire at the end of this month?
Well, the debate is that subsidies in one bill, especially the one that Republicans are pushing, the extension of the subsidies, do not exist, as we expected months ago. So the question here is, once again, what's going to happen? The new bill that Republicans are pushing is a very complicated issue in terms of how you can get some money to basically cover some of the increases that we're going to see in basically 3 weeks, right? If we don't extend this thing for 3 years as the Democrats want to push it. So once again, we're going to be in a position where there is no debate, because one side wants something that the other side is not willing to accept one way or the other. at the end, if we don't have this extension of the subsidies, we have seen the numbers, and the numbers indicate that some of the insurance premiums are going to be oscillating around 120% increases, which is going to have a detrimental effect. And this detrimental effect is like a snowball. And this snowball is people are not going to pay health insurance. They're not going to pay health insurance. So if they get sick, they go, for example, to emergency rooms. That increases the cost for hospitals to do it, because there is a law that says that if you're sick and you go to an emergency room, you have to be admitted and fixed one way or the other. So that is a cost for hospitals. Then that's going to increase. Then premiums are going to increase even more. Then people are going to get sick. They're not going to be able to go to work, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So productivity is going to be hurt. The economy is going to be hurt. Instead of having, we benefit as a society if we have a healthy population. Why? Because the healthy population don't miss work. The healthy population are happier. The healthy population can spend more money, so on and so forth, right? So it's one of these things that is like, it's easy, but when you're confronting policy issues, you have to be able to decide, do we want to solve the issue, or do we want to stick to our guns and say, these are my beliefs and I'm going to stick them regardless of the consequences, negative consequences for the economy, for society overall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I suspect the question that they ask instead is, which of these plans will help me win re-election? But maybe I'm being overly cynical. Maybe. Brandon, pair of figures from the state's political past have died. Former Texas Lieutenant Governor Bill Ratliff died Monday. Former U.S. Secretary of Education and one-time HISD trustee and superintendent and TSU athletic director and coach Rod Page died on Tuesday. What are their respective legacies?
Yeah, two giants in the political field in the mid-90s and helped to guide Texas to its present state. You're seeing a lot of the changes happening now effectively undo what both of these gentlemen did. Bill Ratliff was a giant in the Senate. He was talked about as Obi-Wan. He had this kind of skill set that would just allow him to understand what both sides wanted and navigate effectively. He once told me when I was writing my Rick Perry book that at the time, the Senate was basically not just bipartisan, but nonpartisan, that the goal was to fix Texas, make it better. That to me is, I think, a pretty good hallmark and a pretty good legacy on the issues like education and on campaign finance reform. He was a spearhead. Rod Page, obviously, education was his bailiwick. He had held basically every job that you could hold at the higher end and primary ed. So it's to his credit that we saw big policy changes in the early 2000s when President Bush was elected, and some of those big changes are being kind of unraveled at this point. But we're really the hallmark of education policy in this country for about 20 years.
Brandon Rottinghaus and Jeronimo Cortina are the co-hosts of Houston Public Media's Party Politics program. You can hear it Friday night at 7:30 on News 88.7, Friday night at 8. You can see it on TV 8. You can also check it out at your leisure on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Gentlemen, thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Greg.
you.
And just ahead, imagining life after cars. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Check in with the latest developments in the Houston housing market.
And I'm Ernie Manous. We'll also have actors from the Alley Theater's A Christmas Carol to help us celebrate this yearly tradition.
It's Hello Houston, where Houston talks 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. here on News 88.7.
Support comes from the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, offering comprehensive cancer care that is compassionate, personalized, and driven by clinical research. More at stlukeshealth.org/cancer.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. As we've discussed before on this program, it is very much possible to get by in Houston without a car. It's not easy, though. We don't have sidewalks everywhere that we should. Streets get redesigned, sometimes to make them more walkable. More recently, though, changes have made some streets far less. Car-centric policies seem to be winning out a little more these days. It makes it all the more challenging to imagine Greater Houston as part of a world with fewer cars. Our next guests encourage you to imagine just that. Sarah Goodyear and Doug Gordon are the hosts of the podcast The War on Cars. They're also the co-authors of the book Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. Sarah, Doug, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to be here.
Tyranny.
Yes.
Yes.
What makes this tyrannical, this idea of everybody in their cars?
Well, if you think about what tyranny is, it means you never are not thinking of the tyrant. It is a factor in your life when you wake up, when you spend your days, when you go to bed. And that's a little bit how car ownership works. It's, you wake up, what's the traffic report going to be? Oh no, there's a flat tire, or my transmission is busted. I have to spend all this money. You go to bed at night stressed out from the traffic you just experienced. Not a day goes by where you're not thinking of the car in your life. So that's a bit tyrannical in a sense.
Yeah, and also there's, in most of the United States of America, and certainly this is true of Houston, there's no choice. You're trapped inside a system and you don't have the freedom to do otherwise most of the time.
I was going to say, the two of you live in Brooklyn, New York, which I would argue is probably more easily walkable than Houston.
You would be making a correct argument.
Just
yes,
a little,
yes.
yeah.
So, but you have been riding bikes and walking a little bit and taking some transit here in town. What is your impression of what you've seen so far?
Well, first of all, the light rail is really great. And, that is something that seems to be very functional. And we've gotten around pretty well on that. The walking is not so great. We did almost get run over on the way here by a pickup truck turning into a parking lot. I mean, obviously the streets are designed for cars. Cars first, cars most, and people seem to be an afterthought in a lot of the streets, and that's daunting.
There are good downtown bike lanes. The bike lane network, such that it is growing. And, I know some have been removed. We'll probably talk about that. But the design of those facilities are quite good by any standard in North America. So you just have to keep building on that. And obviously a fantastic trail system all over the city. As
you alluded to, the city of Houston was definitely slowly moving in your direction, in the philosophy, your approach of, the world should be more walkable and bikeable and so forth. That has largely been reversed since Mayor Whitmire took office. He's even ordered the reversal of some completed street projects to make them more favorable for cars and trucks, arguing more Houstonians benefit from that. What is your message for anyone who says simply, no, I'm sorry, but more of us use cars and trucks? That's what it takes to get around in a sprawling metropolis. We have too much built out already. There's no way to really do this where most Houstonians can get by any other way. So, no. What do you say in response to that?
Well, first of all, giving people options is good for drivers, too. Getting people off the road, onto transit, onto bikes, that reduces traffic congestion for drivers. So giving people options is actually good for everybody. But precisely that people deserve choices about how to get around. You shouldn't be forced into one mode or another just by the way the government decides to spend its money. You should be able to, I believe, that everybody should be able to choose a walkable neighborhood if they want. Right now in this country, walkable neighborhoods are a luxury good. They're really only for rich people. And most people of lesser means are forced into a situation where they have to use their car for every trip. And I don't think that's right.
Yeah, there are people who obviously love driving and love their cars, but I think most people hate the daily, the quotidian get up, go to work, what's the traffic going to be, or having to drive 20 minutes and find parking just to get a gallon of milk. So our message to drivers who love to drive, the weekend driver, someone who tinkers on a car in their garage, or people who just love the alone time in the morning on the commute is exactly what Sarah's saying. If you love driving, you should be in favor of getting everybody else onto transit, onto a bike if they're able to do it. If you absolutely have to drive because of mobility issues or where you live currently, then you should, if I move to Houston, the last thing anybody wants here is another driver on the road. I should move here and say, oh, there's the bus, there's the light rail, there's the bike lane, and I can get by mostly without a car.
So despite hosting a show called The War on Cars and writing a book called Life After Cars, you're not necessarily anti-car so much as you are pro a variety of choices.
Yeah, I mean, we recognize that cars are a great tool for mobility, and in certain places they're the best tool for mobility, but they're not always the best tool. And, as Doug was saying, to go to a store that's a half mile away, wouldn't it be nice, instead of having to get into your car and drive down an arterial road and around and into a parking lot, if you could just walk there or bike there? I think it really is about freedom and choice and not being locked into a system that's extremely costly for people. And just, if a family can go from 2 cars or 3 cars to 1 car, it's a huge savings. That's money that can go into education, vacation, all sorts of things. Why should we be locked into this system where every single person has to have their own personal big motor vehicle to go on every trip?
Sarah Goodyear and Doug Gordon are the hosts of the War on Cars podcast. They're also the authors of Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. They'll be at the Match tonight at 7 for an event organized by Bike Houston. Sarah, Doug, thank you both very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And still to come, Ensemble Theatre's unique approach to a holiday production. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Houston.org.
Support comes from Discovery Green Conservancy, presenting Carols on the Green with Houston Grand Opera, December 13th at 7 p.m., hosted by Jorge Perotti and open to the public. Details at discoverygreen.com.
Houston Public Media is a service of the University of Houston and is supported with your gifts to the Houston Public Media Foundation. More information available online at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
While many performance venues and companies around town are presenting traditional holiday classics this month, like A Christmas Carol and a performance of Handel's Messiah, Houston's Ensemble Theatre is offering something a bit different. Take the Soul Train to Christmas is a play filled with music and dance that celebrates the joy and resilience of African Americans. It covers the 1800s through today and explores how Black families across generations have celebrated the season even in the face of injustice. To learn more about the show, Houston Matters producer Laura Walker visited with cast members Fortune Onwunali and Imani Giles. First, though, she talks with director Aisha Ussery, who explains how Ekundayo Bandele's play spoke to her.
So when I first read the piece, I thought about myself as an African American, thinking about my parents and all the stories that I heard, all the pain, but also remembering all the joy at the same time. So as African American people, we take mud and we make it magic.
How did you make it resonate for audiences today?
Black history is 365, right? And so we are joy. Christmas is about joy. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And we as African American people, we really live that. We are joyous all day, all year. Now, we're out with our fans and we are doing line dances. I mean, and that's something that resonates through the piece. We are dancing, we are singing, we are connecting, we are finding those moments that are held near and dear to us. And that is the meaning of Christmas. It's joy.
We talk about the fans. Music is so influential to the African diaspora. It plays a major role in how stories are told within the culture. The show travels through African American drumming, jazz, disco, hip hop, each with its own cultural rhythm. How did music and movement help you tell this intergenerational story?
Ooh, so the movement we found as we were studying, the movement of today is the same movement of the olden times. We just put a little spin on it, you know. We talk about the African movement and how we move our hips. That's what the young kids are doing today in 2025. That's what they did in the 70s. That's what every period. There are motifs in the movement, and so you can see that thread all the way through the piece. And again, same thing with the music. I mean, music is universal. Those songs resonate. Fortune sings "Santa Claus Goes Straight to the Ghetto." I mean, it's comedy, but it's funky. You know. Fortune, talk about that song because Fortune kills it. You know,
He does.
It's a little James Brown. We all love a James Brown moment.
Absolutely, Fortune, you're one of the actors in the play. Can you tell me about that moment?
Yeah, so Santa Claus Going Straight to the Ghetto. I grew up loving James Brown. James Brown is something that me and my family, being in a Nigerian household, was one of the things that they're like, hey, we come to America, like, this is one of the people we got to see every day, all day. And so whenever I'm doing the song, it reminds me of when I was a kid and I was just wanting to feel that vibe of James Brown and like what James Brown meant to me as a young one. Not really just now kind of understanding like this rhythm, right? Because in our culture, we have this natural rhythm, right? But then when I saw James Brown rhythm, it felt the same and yet different at the same time, right? Whenever I'm doing Santa Claus Goes Straight to the Ghetto, it just gives me that, it just shows me that kid in me, you know? And it really enjoying that moment that I'm having, and it's just also a fun time. Like it really is just a fun time.
Absolutely, and going back to the your statement, Black people make magic from mud. How do you feel that translates even in your own life?
Oh, I mean, we are in a constant struggle. I mean, let's just say life is lifing.
Yes.
We have so many things to do within 24 hours, just within your household, but there are so many outside influences. So how do you keep going? You rest on what's in your DNA. You rest on that joy that's within. You rest on prayers. That's how you get by. I am my ancestors' wildest dream, and I don't forget where I've come from and the people who are continuing to pave the way. And I hope that I'm doing the same thing, which brings me to my niece here in the play, Imani, who plays Rosa. It's a joy to see her in this space, nailing it every night.
In your director's notes, you mentioned that freedoms are still being challenged in 2025. What parallels do you see between the errors that are captured in the play and the challenges our communities face today?
So being a young girl sitting in school and reading history books, I thought that it was something of the past and I would not experience it. Hearing the stories that my parents and, my dad's a philosopher and they sit around the table and talk about all these things and how they're going to move the culture forward. It was talk that happened. I never thought that I would live it, and I really feel it now. I feel like it's a little bit worse, and it's in my face every day. I don't always feel free, which I have to go back and find that joy, and it's the love of the arts. We have to continue voting, continue to speak, continuing to educate the young people, continuing to allow them to carry the torch.
Absolutely. Now, Fortune, you're one of the actors in the play. Who are you in Take the Soul Train to Christmas?
So I am a couple of characters. I am James Brown, when we're doing of course. I'm also the piano man. I play the drums, and I'm also Afro One, as well as I'm Dino Man in the hip hop scene.
Ooh, yes.
Okay, Dino Man. I like the sound of that. You describe your work that you've done as a way to inspire positive change. How does this production reflect that mission, especially during a season that calls for both reflection and celebration?
What this show also does is it shifts the angle of what we may or may not know about, one, and two, that the story that we're telling are not your typical Christmas stories.
Right.
And what makes it cool is that we're having fun doing it and you still get the message.
Yeah.
And I think that is the most beautiful thing in this moment that I really enjoy about the performance and the reflection of this musical.
And this isn't Aisha, your first Christmas production that you've been a part of at the Ensemble. What is it about Christmas productions that draw you in? And what would you say is special about the way the Ensemble Theater brings that each time?
The shows that are chosen allow people to just sit back and relax, but also to reflect, because it speaks to the demographic, which is largely African American, and so they can see themselves represented in the shows, in the music, in the eras in which they grew up. So I think the ensemble does a really, really great job of creating visibility, and then also making it an inclusive space for everyone, because the E stands for everyone at the Ensemble Theater, right? So, but I'm drawn to it because I understand that I have the power to give someone a night off from whatever it is that they're doing in the world, from work, from caretaking, from, you name it. But I'm giving you a moment just to relax. You can let all that go for about 2 hours, woosah, and then you have an opportunity to step back into the real world if you want to. Or you can just live in the magic of Christmas.
Yeah. And I actually agree with the idea of visibility. I think that one of the things that draw me to the Christmas show is the first. And I say the first in the sense of the Ensemble Theater is the first professional musical theater that I have done. And it was the Christmas show. And for me, at that time that I did the Christmas show, I was in a place where I didn't think that that kid needed to exist anymore. I think when Aisha gave me that opportunity to do my first professional theater show and a musical at that, it opened my eyes to the possibilities that, well, not even just the possibility, the idea that this kid is still there, like he still exists, like he is still capable, like he is still moving, he is still pushing. And ever since then, if there was nothing I wanted to do at the Ensemble Theater or any theater, I know that the Ensemble Theater Christmas show is something that holds dear to me, because the Christmas shows are never just about dancing and singing and being the greatest singers, and it's never about that. It's about the message that we have put, the energy and sweat and the time that we just sit down and talk about what this show means to us, for people. Because a lot of times what we hear when we finish the shows is, I've never been to a Christmas show. I've never seen a performance before. I've never been to theater. And this is my first time in a long time or ever. And y'all have changed my perspective. And it's all because of the Ensemble Theater. And I think that has been my testimony and other people's testimony. And so that's why the Christmas show has always and still will always be a special place in my heart at the Ensemble Theater.
Yeah, that's great. I can definitely tell. And I have my own experience with that. I took my husband for the first time to the last Christmas play, 12 Ways of Christmas, and especially your section. He was cracking up laughing. And it was great. And as somebody who typically does not enjoy Christmas music, I'm sorry, I might be a Grinch. But I loved it, and it was like original, and there was so much feeling, and there were so many different stories, and I love that the ensemble brings that every time. Imani.
Yes.
This is your first professional production at the Ensemble Theater. What has it been like to step into a story that's both historical and magical, and to do it alongside seasoned artists?
Yes, correct. It is my first show at the Ensemble Theater, And I've always been a part of the Young Performers program, and I've kind of grown up at the Ensemble Theater. My baby shower was a one-woman show performed by my mother in the black box. So it's kind of a full circle moment being able to be around people that I've always kind of heard about or watched. And it's an amazing experience, to say the least, to just be able to hear the minds of Miss Aisha, the director, and to watch Mr. Melvin compose the music in front of my face.
Yeah.
It is amazing. And it just goes to show how much goes into it, as well as how talented these people are to kind of create these things. Because I've always seen the final product or been a part of productions where it's already been there and it's been something that's been workshopped. I've never been in the room where it happened, the room that kind of put it out there, and to just be a part of kind of the base layer of that, and to be able to build a character on top of that and come up with these different quirks that Rosa might have and different discoveries every night. Just to be a part of that around seasoned actors has been a blessing.
As a young performer and creator, what message do you hope your peers take away from this show about heritage, hope, and creativity?
How much that goes into it, because it's easy to sit in your point in life and just think of it as that's all that it is. I think that it's easy to look over the history that goes into certain things, to kind of be content or be okay with not knowing. For example, I didn't know how much really went into different generations of Christmas time for Black people before I was in this production. So I just want young people to take away the idea of this being something that was history, but is also the same concept, but just in a different generation. Especially in this day and time where there's so much going on, and there's so many places where heads are turning to see what's going to happen next over here, to just kind of understand that, you know, history does repeat itself, and there is a beauty in that. There is tragedy in that, but at the end of the day, it's what you do with that makes you different from other generations, makes you persevere just like people that came before you, and what makes you different. How does that move you forward? What is it about what is going on right now? What is it about these things that help you come into yourself? I think that I want younger people to kind of expand their minds and not be okay with just sitting and watching and waiting, to be those people who go in front of the bar and hook hands with the people that are already doing the thing, and singing out when no one else is, and just being that first step, because somebody has to do it.
Actors Imani Giles and Fortune Onwunali, along with director Aisha Ussery, they are all from Ensemble Theater's production of Take the Soul Train to Christmas. It's on stage through December 21st. They spoke with Houston Matters producer Laura Walker. And that will do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Tom Carter was our technical director today. Remember, you can check out Houston Matters anytime. Subscribe to our podcast for the audio. Visit Houston Public Media's YouTube channel for the video. When you're there, comment, like, subscribe, and the rest, or reach out to us at talk@houstonmatters.org with any thoughts you have about the show. On tomorrow's program, a conversation with Brad Pritchett, the new CEO of Equality Texas. Also, we'll learn about a new documentary which chronicles the Bum Phillips era of the old Houston Oilers. It's called Love Ya Bum. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us tomorrow for those and other Houston Matters.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric